Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron, I hope you're having a great day in Jesus. We're going to be finishing up the Science in the Bible Part 2, from Indiana Bible College here. So students, probably some others, going to be watching over the course of time. Students, you're going to be required to leave a comment. We will send you an email about what needs to be in the comment section. So let's get started. We stopped last time we were at Indiana Bible College on proofs of a young earth, and we went through like the first 10, solar decomposition, sun's decreasing in size 5 feet per second, lunar recession, the moon is moving away from the earth 1 3/4 inch to about 3 1/4 inch per year. So obviously these things, if they would have been carried out through long ages of time, could not have existed. The earth couldn't have existed and that type thing. Moon dust, planetary rings, existence of planetary rings, Earth's magnetic field depletion, the existence of comets and meteors, genetic decomposition, centropy, which is closed systems in nature. There's complexity. And William Paley's great book that was required reading at Cambridge, by the way, from 1820 to 1920, about the divine watchmaker, really showed this. If you were walking through a swamp and found a watch, you would think, who dropped that here? And that watch had a designer, because you saw complexity. And that's the way, whether it's your respiratory system, your cardio system, your nervous system, any other system, your skeletal systems, your vascular system, and then the systems in nature, hearing, brain, just so many different systems. So great proof there. Symbiosis, which is, birds require certain things, like bees require flowers, flowers require bees, we require plants require us. So we had to be created at basically the same time. Occam's razor fits the biblical account, as does reality. And Occam's razor, I've done a video on the reality principle, and that it just fits with that which conforms with reality. Occam's razor, William of Occam, philosopher of medieval times, said that the simplest answer that has all known facts to it is usually correct. And so obviously when you read Genesis 1, 2, and 3 and you look around, that's just what happened. And if you go through the specificities of each micro step that had to happen from the Big Bang and where did that come from and all this till now, you realize that, if you look at it superficially, you could see evolution of Big Bang. But again, once you begin to look at the different micro steps that had to happen, you realize that it is literally impossible. So we're number 11, and that is the laws of information technology, the laws of information technology. And this is basically that information comes from information. The reason computers have information inputted into them is because a human who has information inputs it into them. The reason, our semiconductors and these type things have information in them is because it was inputted into them. And so when you have DNA, which is incredibly complex, and there's entire studies done just on DNA and the complexity of DNA, then that would not have occurred randomly. As a matter of fact, that would contradict all known laws of science for organization and information to arise from randomness and chaos. As a matter of fact, like the first and second laws of thermodynamics are saying that things are currently going from a more ordered state to a less ordered state. The Big Bang and evolution would say things are constantly going from a less ordered state to a more ordered state, which violates these inviolate laws of observable science and scientific laws. Not scientific theories, but scientific laws. There's a difference. And some people try to juxtapose those and try to blend those, but there really is a difference between scientific laws and scientific theories. So the law of information technology says that information has to come from information. Of course, the greatest source of information is divine information, that which is omniscient, all information, which is God. All right, number 12, chaos doesn't produce order. Just mention that this violates two laws of thermodynamics. You know, you think about it, where was the Big Bang? They don't know where the dot was. It used to be called the primeval atom. They're calling it something else now. But where was the dot? If space and time was in the dot, then where was the dot? Where did the dot come from? What were the mechanisms of the dot's explosions? And then how, if space is frictionless in open space, then there would be no slowing down the initial explosion. There would be no stopping the initial explosion. Things would not congregate together to form stars and nebulae and galaxies and quasars and such like. Nebulae, different type. But you know, the laws of angular momentum would not allow for spiral galaxies to form. A lot of different things there. So chaos doesn't produce order. Something that's designed, you don't blow up a typewriter factory to get the Encyclopedia Britannica. It takes an informer, something that it is a designer that does those things. And so this is a great proof of young earthism. Number 13, that's 11, 12, 13 would be the implausibility of the Big Bang. You know, there was a book written, I think in 91, secular book about the Big Bang and the implausibility. It's only gotten more implausible since then. And so the Big Bang, again, if you just look at it, that we all started out as a speck. And I'm not talking about individuals in the zygote and all this, but I'm talking about the Saturn was in the speck, and the sun was in the speck, and Andromeda Galaxy was in the speck, and Alpha Centauri and Arcturus was in the speck, and Orion's Belt was in the speck, and Pleiades were in the speck, and the trillions upon trillions of stars were contained in the speck, and plants were in the speck. I mean, it gets kind of, for lack of a better term, Orwellian. It's just like, that's kind of weird. So the implausibility of the Big Bang and the impossibility. Again, when I say taking it step by step, and I think I did this in class, I know I've done it in other videos on our YouTube channel, church YouTube channel, that you just go step by step. It's just like, this didn't happen. All right. Next, number 14 is mistaking variation for macroevolution. Mistaking variation for macroevolution. And what this is, God created within our genetic structure the ability to cope for certain local differences. And so within that genetic variation, you know, at times of very good nutrition, people may grow taller. With less nutrition, people might grow shorter, something like that. There's variation within a species, but this is in no way indicative of crossing genetic walls and having other species. Just doesn't happen. That's never been observed. One would be called, in certain parlance, microevolution, which we would believe in. The other would be macroevolution, which we don't believe in, and which has never been observed, even within the confines of science, with intelligence doing everything possible to make it happen. It has just never happened, because there are certain genetic walls there. So that's something I constantly get on the YouTube channel, is people like yelling on the keyboard, telling me there is no difference between microevolution and macroevolution, when there literally is. And so mutations will sometimes cause negative microevolution, like a species of fruit flies may be born with a third wing or 4 eyes or something like that. But it's never beneficial. It's always harmful to the thing being nuked there, so to speak. And so that is something that is very, very good proof of a young Earth, is mistaking variation for macroevolution. 15 is genetic walls, and some of these you can see there's like a progression. One leads to another sometimes. So genetic walls is that there are literally walls that extend to variation, like mules and horses and these type things. You get to a point, ligers, lions and tigers, you get to a point to where if something is genetically altered to a certain point, then it ceases to be able to procreate. Now, I am not talking about gene splicing to where some of these Island of Dr. Moreau, you may have heard of, Robert Louis Stevenson type experiments that evidently some are doing, where they're taking DNA splices and splicing. Well, that's obviously human engineering. That is intelligent engineering. Has nothing to do with the theory of evolution at all, which is blind chance, the blind watchmaker, as Dawkins called it. And so there's genetic walls that prohibit things. They can only vary. It's like two dogs. You know, you can get everything from a Pekingese to a Great Dane or a Siberian Husky, but there comes a point in time that you just can't turn that into a cat. You cannot turn that into a cheetah. They're dogs. You might have small dogs, big dogs. It's like different thoroughbred horses. It's like different cattle breeds. And so, you know, Angus, Hereford cattle, Brahman, all of this, they're all cattle. They're just, it's like humans, you know, there's variations within the human species, but they're all humans. And so there's that. All right, so there's genetic walls. Now, a lot of people here bring up birds, by the way. They're like, you know, cardinals can't mate with bluebirds and stuff like that. Well, then that would mean that each species of bird is a separate species or genus. And it would actually prove the point, because the genetic walls would keep cardinals. But now, the more I've studied that, the more that is not an inviolate rule too. There's a lot more possible interbreeding in the bird realm than has been previously given credit for. So that's a whole different deal. All right, so genetic walls, the harmfulness of mutation. So basically, survival of the fittest, they would say that what the causative mechanisms of evolution, since we know there's genetic walls, since we know that an amputee, the fact that he may be missing a leg does not influence his DNA at all. And so, or if somebody bleached their hair blonde, then their children, because it doesn't affect the DNA is where the encoding is, that it doesn't pass down. The Jews have been circumcising people for 4,000 years, and there's no proclivity amongst Jews to be born without a foreskin. And so this totally shows that genetic walls do exist. Okay, and so the harmfulness of mutations, since Mendelian laws of genetics show that it is in the DNA, so you can cut off a mice's tail for 20 generations, and the mice is still going to be born with a tail because the DNA says it's supposed to have a tail. These are external things that are going, so like spontaneous generation, when Louis Pasteur really devastated the theory of evolution to the point that, you know, Helen Petrovna Blavatsky was doing spells on him, and Annie Besant Wood was doing it as well, who took Petrovna Blavatsky's place at the Theosophical Society, because they're like, this just really destroys the theory of evolution, with Pasteur's beaker showing that maggots just don't magically form out of rotting flesh and all this kind of thing. Well, so then the only other mechanism for evolution is mutations. And so mutations are harmful, not beneficial. In almost every case, there's maybe one out of a statistical impossibility for evolution to have occurred, but every so often there may be something that would appear to be beneficial on the surface, but usually turns out not to be beneficial in the least because it's harming the chromosomal and that. All right, number 17 is topsoil depletion. And topsoil depletion is, there's just a limited amount of topsoil, and scientists have estimated how much topsoil there has been on planet Earth in times past, and right now planet Earth is in many parts very dangerously low in the thickness of topsoil, and there's really no known mechanisms for replenishing topsoil and for growing. So scientists are looking into the future saying the future looks fairly bleak for growth and you know, crops and these, and famine stares us in the face. And so topsoil is gradually depleting across the world, and this is again a proof of a young Earth, because if you start at the flood until now, and it's laying down of wonderful silt all over the earth for growth, and you do the math, you have about the right amount of topsoil that you would have. But if the earth did not have a flood and was a lot older, you know, 15.4 billion years and 4.6 billion years, 15.4 billion years for the Big Bang, 4.6 billion years for the Earth, the Earth would not have any topsoil left at all. It's like the sun's decomposition would be burning the Earth. There's just a lot of things. So topsoil depletion, Niagara Falls is decomposing at the rate of about 5 feet a second towards Lake Erie and eventually towards the Atlantic Ocean. And so we know Niagara Falls must have formed somewhere around the time of the flood, because if it was older than that, it would be all the way back, you know, at the ocean and eating its way, depending on where it was, even through the ocean over to Great Britain. But I don't think scientifically that would have happened. But you see the point that Niagara Falls must be a relatively early and a relatively recent thing. And so this again shows that the Earth is relatively young. Lastly, in this particular lesson is silt deposits. And you think about it, you know, all the rivers flow into the sea. Well, with it is a multitude of megatonnage every year of silt, such as the Mississippi River deposits an incredible amount of silt and is gradually filling up the Gulf of Mexico, and would gradually, you know, fill up where it would be very difficult for the Mississippi River to run. And so they can measure the silt deposits that are there and with other rivers throughout the world, and so they know that the rate of silt deposit would conform basically with Noah's flood around 2348, 2349 BC, because again, if this is going on for many thousands of years, antedating that, there would be too much silt in the various large bodies of water in the world, such as oceans and seas. So we'll stop there and pick up. God bless. Talk with you later in Jesus' name.